When Flash Gordon rocketed into theaters in 1980, audiences saw a loud, colorful space opera bursting with over-the-top villains, rocket-powered motorcycles, and pulpy spectacle. But underneath the camp and chaos is a fascinating production history full of near misses, creative clashes, and behind-the-scenes drama. Here are 15 things you probably never knew about this cult classic. Long before Star Wars changed cinema forever, George Lucas actually tried to buy the rights to Flash Gordon from King Features Syndicate back in the early 1970s. When the licensing costs proved too steep and creative control became a sticking point, negotiations collapsed. Rather than walk away from the genre entirely, Lucas built his own space saga, drawing heavily on the same pulp serial storytelling that made Alex Raymond's original comic strip a classic. Producer Gary Kurtz later confirmed that Lucas had loved Flash Gordon since he was a kid, having grown up watching the old Buster Crabbe serials over and over. You can see the fingerprint of those Depression-era matinee adventures all over Star Wars. The opening crawl, the wipe transitions, the whole visual rhythm. By the time Universal and producer Dino De Laurentiis finally got a proper Flash Gordon adaptation off the ground, Lucas had already claimed the space opera crown with his own creation. Screenwriter Lorenzo Semple Jr., who had written for the deliberately silly 1960s Batman series starring Adam West, penned the Flash Gordon script under De Laurentiis. That background explains a lot. The theatrical dialogue and heightened, tongue-in-cheek tone owe a clear debt to the same self-aware camp that made Batman a pop culture hit. Interestingly, director Mike Hodges initially wanted something darker and more grounded, closer to his earlier work on Get Carter, but De Laurentiis pushed hard for Semple's vision instead. Semple wasn't just a camp specialist, either. He'd also written the far more serious 3 Days of the Condor and The Parallax View, proving he could handle tension and craft when needed. His Flash Gordon script threads a strange needle between sincere adventure and knowing wink, a tone that baffled critics in 1980, but has won over modern audiences. Sam J. Jones landed the title role after appearing on The Dating Game, the same show that helped launch the careers of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Farrah Fawcett. De Laurentiis' daughter, Rafaela, spotted Jones on the program and pushed for him, sensing star potential underneath his boyish charm. Jones's background as a former Marine and bodybuilder made him a natural fit for producers who wanted a genuinely physical hero, someone who could handle the demanding stunt work choreographed by Peter Diamond. His football uniform entrance in the film was a deliberate showcase of that athleticism, framing Flash as an everyday American guy suddenly thrown into a cosmic adventure. Jones had almost no acting experience, but that arguably worked in the film's favor. His earnestness reads as sincere in a way a more polished, ironic performance might not have. Kurt Russell reportedly turned down the role, worried about getting typecast in science fiction after years tied to Disney and TV work. Arnold Schwarzenegger was also seriously considered by both De Laurentiis and Hodges, but producers ultimately felt his thick Austrian accent didn't fit the all-American hero they had in mind. That left the door open for a relative unknown in Sam J. Jones, whose lack of prior baggage made it easier for audiences to accept him purely as Flash. Casting director Joyce Foreman reportedly combed through major talent agencies before landing on Jones, and his everyman quality, a contrast of more chiseled action stars of the era, became a defining part of the character's appeal. During early development, De Laurentiis' team in Rome reportedly discussed both Federico Fellini and Sergio Leone as possible directors. Given his history working with Fellini on other Italian productions, De Laurentiis apparently envisioned Flash Gordon as operatic spectacle requiring a distinctly European visionary touch. In the end, Mike Hodges got the job, bringing the grounded, dramatic sensibility from films like Get Carter that created real friction with Semple's theatrical, camp-heavy script, a clash between Hodges' serious instincts and the material's inherent silliness. Strangely, that tension is part of what makes the film work. Earnest performances collide with wildly exaggerated production design, and the result feels genuinely unlike anything else from the era. Gilbert Taylor, the cinematographer behind both Star Wars and Dr. Strangelove, shot Flash Gordon using techniques honed across decades, working with Stanley Kubrick and George Lucas. His soft lighting and hazy filters give the film its distinctive, almost feverish visual texture, less like a realistic alien world and more like a half-remembered dream. Taylor had famously clashed with Lucas on Star Wars over lighting philosophy, favoring theatrical contrast over Lucas's more documentary-style approach. On Flash Gordon, De Laurentiis gave him much more creative freedom at Shepard Studios, letting him experiment with colored gels and layered exposures. The result elevates what were often fairly cheap sets into something that feels genuinely mythic. Production took place almost entirely at Elstree and Shepard Studios in the UK, relying on massive built sets and matte paintings instead of any real-world locations. Production designer Danilo Donati, an Oscar winner for both Romeo and Juliet and Fellini's Casanova, built Flash's universe using deliberately theatrical techniques rather than anything meant to look naturalistic. Part of the choice to shoot in Britain came down to tax incentives, and part came from access to the skilled craftsmen at Pinewood and Shepperton. Donati leaned into bright primary colors and forced perspective, giving everything a comic strip panel feel that owed more to Alex Raymond's original artwork than contemporaries like Alien or Star Trek. Critics were split on the theatrical look back in 1980, but today it reads as a deliberate, confident rejection of realism. Before post-production wrapped at Twickenham Studios, Sam J. Jones walked off the project entirely following a contract dispute, a real problem for director Mike Hodges, since some of Jones's dialogue still needed to be re-recorded. Another actor stepped in for portions of the ADR work, though exactly who has remained murky in production accounts over the years. The rift reportedly stemmed from disagreements between Jones and De Laurentiis over promotional obligations and the terms tied to potential sequels the producer had been planning. Jones apparently wanted to renegotiate his deal after seeing early footage, believing the film was shaping up to be a hit worth more money. The fallout was permanent, closing the door on any chance of Jones returning for the sequels that were, at the time, still very much part of the plan. Actress Dale Hayden was originally cast as Dale Arden during pre-production, before being replaced by Melody Anderson over reported chemistry concerns during early rehearsals with Jones and Hodges. Anderson, a Canadian actress with journalism background, brought a different energy to the role, playing Dale as capable and dryly witty, rather than simply decorative. The last-minute swap led to some minor inconsistencies between early promotional material and what actually made it into the finished film. But Anderson's chemistry with both Jones and co-star Topol strengthened the romantic tension driving much of the story, and her performance balanced old-fashioned damsel expectations with a more modern sense of agency. Queen composed and performed the majority of the film's soundtrack, with Brian May and Roger Taylor spending months at Musicland Studios in Munich integrating a full rock score directly into the action and dialogue. That was a genuinely unusual move for 1980, when sweeping orchestral scores from composers like John Williams dominated sci-fi soundtracks for films like Star Wars and Superman. The band synced musical cues tightly to fight scenes and chases, with Freddie Mercury's vocals punctuating key beats like Ming's attacks and Flash's heroics. Howard Blake contributed additional orchestral arrangements where traditional scoring was still needed. In the end, the soundtrack outperformed the movie itself commercially, going platinum and introducing Queen to a swath of American listeners who'd largely overlooked the band up to that point. Max von Sydow's elaborate Ming costume, designed by Donati, was so heavy and restrictive, with its layered robes, armor plating, and towering collar, that von Sydow reportedly had to lie down between takes rather than sit, since sitting risked damaging the costume's construction. Von Sydow, best known for his collaborations with Ingmar Bergman on films like The Seventh Seal, played Ming with total sincerity despite Semple's campy dialogue. He later told a journalist that he approached the character as a tragic figure, an immortal emperor worn down by centuries of absolute power. The sheer physical weight of the costume reinforced that read, forcing every movement to feel slow, deliberate, and menacing. Flash Gordon earned roughly $27 million domestically against a $20 million budget. Between its mixed critical reception and stiff competition from The Empire Strikes Back, those numbers were enough to end the sequel plans of Laurentiis had been aggressively developing. Contracts negotiated for the cast had reportedly anticipated multiple follow-up films, with options building for Jones, Anderson, and other cast members. The underwhelming domestic returns meant several unresolved plot threads in the finale were simply never followed up on. Internationally, especially in the UK, where Queen's popularity gave the film an extra boost, It performed somewhat better, but the disappointing domestic showing was enough to kill any franchise ambitions for good. The film's episodic pacing, frequent cliffhangers, and abrupt chapter-style transitions are a direct nod to the 1936 Buster Crabbe Flash Gordon serial that Universal produced for Saturday matinee crowds. That structure ties back even further to Alex Raymond's original 1934 comic strip, which helped pioneer ongoing, cliffhanger-driven storytelling in newspapers.